You're nothing but a family embarrassment. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I just stood up and started telling the story they spent years trying to bury. Buckle up. This is the version they never wanted you to hear. I was halfway through my third sip of lukewarm coffee when I hit post. No filters, no soft language. Just the receipts, the voice memo, the timeline, and my name at the bottom. I didn't tremble. I didn't refresh the screen. I just leaned back and let it happen. The rain outside the cafe window traced slow, uneven lines down the glass, as if the sky itself was trying to read what I had written. A few people sat scattered around the room. Students, freelancers, retirees. None of them aware that in the last 10 seconds, a small bomb had detonated online. One that carried my family's name. I didn't link the group chat. I didn't tag Elaine or Sabrina or any of the wedding vendors. But I knew they'd see it. Someone would forward it. Someone always did. My fingers hovered over my phone again. I could almost hear Elaine's voice in my head, clipped and smug. You could have handled this privately. As if privacy had ever been a courtesy extended to me. As if they hadn't scrubbed me from my own wedding plans and replaced me like a defective light bulb. The post opened with a statement. This was supposed to be my wedding. These were my vendors, my payments, my plans. But my family decided I wasn't good enough to wear the dress I paid for, in the venue I booked, with the music I chose. So they gave it to someone else. My sister. Here's what they didn't count on. I kept everything. Below that came screenshots, email confirmations from the florist, invoices from the string quartet, even the document I'd signed at my mother's urging, which turned out to be a disguised authorization to transfer funds into a family-managed wedding reallocation budget. Her exact words, caught in a voice memo during a lunch meeting I hadn't even realized was being recorded. Sabrina deserves a spotlight more than Rachel ever did. She's the daughter who plays nice. That matters more than being firstborn. I added no commentary, no emotional punctuation, just timestamps, amounts, and silence. By the time I glanced at my screen again, it had begun. First, a notification, then 10, then hundreds. I didn't click the comments, not yet. Instead, I scrolled down to a quiet post from the photographer I had once chosen, someone who had emailed me 3 weeks earlier asking about final confirmations. He'd commented, Rachel was the original client. I have the receipts. She paid everything up front. Then the florist replied under her own repost of my screenshots. Confirmed. Delivery was scheduled in her name for months. We were told it was a switch due to illness. Illness, that's what Elaine had told them. That I was mentally unstable, that I had withdrawn, and it was best not to reach out. I finally clicked the comment thread. The first 100 were from strangers. Then came the people who once knew me. Old coworkers, classmates, even distant cousins who had smiled at me during bridal showers, and then RSVP'd yes to Sabrina's wedding without blinking. Some were vague. I always wondered why she disappeared. This makes sense now. Others hit harder. I used to think Rachel was just dramatic. Now I realize she was erased. And then, Chelsea. Her name popped up under a new comment. Not today, Elaine. My throat tightened. It had been years since she messaged me. Years since she slowly drifted to the other side, not with malice, but with fear. Elaine had helped her father cover up a botched real estate deal years ago. That kind of leverage wasn't easily walked away from. But Chelsea had chosen a side now, and she'd done it publicly. My phone rang. Unknown number. I didn't answer. I knew who it was. Or at least which house it was coming from. Instead, I opened my email, typed in the address I hadn't used in over a year, my mother's, and attached one file. A single-page PDF labeled Final Notice. No greeting, just a subject line. Closure. The body. I gave you a decade. You gave me silence. I'm done negotiating. I hit send. I didn't wait for a response. I didn't want one. Instead, I reached into my wallet, pulled out the embossed card that read, Wells Foundation member, patron level, and stared at it for a full beat before sliding it in half with the butter knife on my saucer. A clean line, just like the one I was drawing now. I remembered the brochure from law school, the one I had buried in a box after Elaine said, "Litigation is too combative for girls. Think community work instead." That folder now sat on my desk at home. I would open it later. But first, I opened the travel app, hovered over the destination field, and typed Reykjavik. The date, October 21st. My finger paused. The screen blinked. Reykjavik, October 21st. Confirmed. The man at immigration didn't ask why I was traveling alone, just stamped my passport and moved on. I liked that. My boots crunched softly against gravel dust as I stepped out into the crisp Reykjavik air. The kind of chill that doesn't claw at you, but asks for your silence in return. It wasn't dramatic. No cinematic fog or sweeping music. Just cold, clean wind and the sound of distance folding in on itself. The kind of quiet that felt earned. The taxi driver said nothing during the ride. Not even when I handed over the printed address of the apartment I'd booked for 2 weeks. He nodded once and pulled away after I closed the door behind me, leaving me at the foot of a squat, square building with pale blue shutters and a rusted mailbox. I liked it immediately. Inside, the keys were where she said they'd be, hung on a brass hook next to a note written in clear block letters. "We don't ask why you came. Just leave the windows cracked if you cook." I dropped my bags and walked straight to the small kitchenette. I made tea, not because I wanted it, but because doing so kept my hands busy. The kettle rumbled with purpose. Everything else in my life had felt so loud lately. Accusations, posts, threads, gasps. This place, by contrast, felt like a blank page, or maybe a reset button disguised as a Nordic rental. My laptop sat on the table like a loaded confession. I opened it. The blog draft was still there. Half written, mostly raw. Disinherit Me, I had called it. A title that once felt bitter but now pulsed with something closer to clarity. I reread the last line I'd typed before leaving Portland. When loyalty is only valued in silence, betrayal becomes a form of freedom. I added 2 paragraphs, then stopped. My fingers hovered over the keys when the email arrived. Subject: You should see this from. Redacted at formerwellsfoundation.org. The message was short. "You don't know me, but I used to work in finance at the Wells Foundation. What your mother did with the charity funds tied to your name, it's not just unethical, it's illegal. Attached are the redacted transfer logs, full versions available if you want them." I downloaded the file. Slowly, as if touching the truth too fast might burn. There it was. Tens of thousands of dollars meant for a youth legal literacy project I'd pitched and registered in my own name, rerouted into something called Emergent Grace Portfolio, an umbrella shell that listed Sabrina as creative liaison. I didn't cry. Not even a little. Not even from rage. I just highlighted the entries, renamed the folder The Quiet Reallocation, and backed it up in 3 different encrypted locations. Then I wrote back. "I'm not planning a lawsuit, but I won't delete this. Thank you for trusting me with the truth." I closed the laptop and stood still for a long time, letting the heat from the mug warm one palm while the other rested on my hip. That's when I realized the silence here didn't just shield me. It reminded me that no one else could interrupt my thoughts. Back home, interruptions were survival mechanisms. "Don't say that in front of your aunt. Maybe let your sister explain. That's not what Mom meant." Here, there were no edits. Just steam, snow, and an old apartment that didn't care if I failed to smile. That afternoon, I wandered into a small bookstore tucked between 2 steep streets, its window fogged by weather and age. Inside, I picked up a secondhand copy of The Ethics of Voice and paid in cash. The clerk looked at me kindly, then said in perfect English, "You look like someone who finally left the room they were never allowed to decorate." I blinked. Then I smiled. I didn't return to the apartment immediately. I walked the long way back, passing strangers bundled in scarves and wool hats, their conversations soft and indecipherable. No one knew my last name here. No one would confuse me with my sister. No one would say, "Oh, are you one of Elaine's daughters?" Like it was a curse and a compliment in equal measure. I was just Rachel, which, for the first time in months, felt like enough. Later that night, as the snow fell in quiet spirals outside, I printed the redacted transfer logs and slid them into a folder I'd labeled, "In case, silence isn't enough." And then, without ceremony, I wrote one more sentence into my blog draft. In case I forget who I used to be. I didn't search for the video. The algorithm brought it to me. Some gifs are poisoned with timing. The screen froze mid-spin, buffering at the exact frame I wished it hadn't. Sabrina, hair curled into the same style I'd spent hours deciding on last summer, stood beneath the string lights of the venue I had paid to reserve. The lace hem of the gown she wore brushed the same polished wooden floorboards I had toured with the event coordinator months ago. The caption read, "A fall wedding dream come true. Sabrina and Miles 2023. I didn't blink, didn't even breathe. I just let the frame burn itself into the back of my eyelids. The algorithm had found me. Of course it had. I didn't follow her. Hadn't clicked any family account since I left Portland. But someone, somewhere, tagged a vendor. Someone liked a post. And the internet, in its infinite hunger for relevance, had decided I needed to witness the event I was written out of. The music in the background started. The exact cello arrangement I'd chosen for my own entrance. Canon in D played just slightly slower than I'd instructed, likely because they hadn't known I'd written specific tempo notes into the contract. The florist's arrangements, which I had commissioned in dusty burgundy and soft gold, framed the arch Sabrina now stood beneath. The comments scrolled faster than I could read. "Isn't that Rachel's dress? Wait, didn't her sister plan this wedding? Where is Rachel?" There was a tremble in my hand now. Not from grief, not even from rage. From recognition, like someone was holding up a mirror and finally showing me how thoroughly I'd been erased, and how clumsily they'd tried to cover their tracks. I clicked pause at the moment Elaine raised her glass for a toast. She stood flanked by guests, glowing in a metallic shawl, her voice catching in what I knew was rehearsed emotion. "To Sabrina," she said, "the daughter who made us proud." There it was. Not our daughters, not my girls, just the daughter. I didn't throw the laptop. I didn't scream. I simply stood, walked to the desk where my folder lay open, the one labeled restitution, and slid in a new printout. The video frame, the transcript, the timestamps. Another stone laid in the path I wasn't done paving. I returned to the kitchen and poured cold tea down the drain. The silence in this apartment didn't echo. It absorbed. There was no one to perform for. No one to reassure. Just me, and the relentless truth of what I now understood. They hadn't tried to ruin me quietly. They wanted me invisible. And for a while, I let them. But invisibility, I was learning, had a shelf life. I turned off the laptop, set my phone face down. I pulled out the old leather notebook I'd carried since college and flipped to a fresh page. I wrote one sentence. I wasn't the ghost at their party. I was the absence that made it echo. I didn't tag them. I didn't need to. The truth knows how to find its own way home. I pressed post and closed the laptop before the screen could refresh. I didn't need to watch it spread. Didn't need to count the likes or brace for the comments. The story was already alive. Words stitched together like evidence in a courtroom no one expected me to walk into. But I wasn't looking for a trial. I wanted a record. The rain outside tapped softly against the cafe windows, but inside my pulse had gone steady, mechanical. I had rehearsed this moment, not in front of mirrors, but in the quiet hours between rage and retreat. I knew what it would cost. I just no longer cared. The post was long. I gave it space to breathe. I wrote about the planning, the venue tours, the vendor meetings, the contracts I signed. I listed the costs, florist invoices, deposits, the photographer's retainer. I included the screenshot of the budgeting document my mother insisted I sign, masked in soft language like consolidation and family clarity. Then came the voice memo. Elaine, calm and cold. Sabrina deserves a spotlight more than Rachel ever did. She's the daughter who plays nice. That matters more than being firstborn. I didn't add any hashtags. No healing or moving on. Just the truth, sequenced like court exhibits. I let it breathe for an hour before checking my phone. There were already over 200 comments, more shares than I'd seen on anything I'd ever posted, even during my nonprofit days. The top comment was from the string quartet. Our original client was Rachel. Everything she shared checks out. A caterer chimed in. I remember confirming a menu with her last summer. The timeline matches. The florist reposted the thread with her own caption. When silence is no longer safe. I scrolled, not to gloat, but to listen. Some people I hadn't heard from in years were tagging each other. Others posted cryptic statements on their own pages. Turns out some of us were clapping for the wrong bride. Blood isn't thicker than receipts. Then, buried halfway down the cascade, was Chelsea. Her profile photo hadn't changed since 2020. Same apartment backdrop, same wine glass half raised in a cropped-out toast. Her comment was short, public. Not today, Elaine. I sat still, let the words settle. Chelsea had once told me, your mom doesn't need to shout to silence people. She just reminds them what they owe her. And for a while, Chelsea had played the safe card. Stayed on the right side of the family current. But now she'd chosen. Openly. I exhaled through my nose and stood to leave. The check was already paid. My hands didn't shake as I slid on my coat. By the time I got home, there was a missed call from a restricted number. Then a voicemail. Elaine's voice, as if wrapped in satin but still cut like glass. We're all very disappointed, Rachel. But I suppose that's always been your role. No apology. Just posture. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my email and typed her address in manually. Subject line, closure, attachment, a single-page PDF labeled Final Notice. I gave you a decade. You gave me silence. I'm done negotiating. I hit send, then I opened the drawer where I kept things I didn't need anymore. The embossed membership card for the Wells Foundation sat nestled next to expired licenses and old Metro passes. I held it for a moment before slicing it clean down the middle with a letter opener. The two halves dropped into the trash with a soft finality I didn't expect to feel so satisfying. Back in my bedroom, I found the dusty law school brochure I'd once hidden beneath an old sweater. I unfolded it, traced the embossed seal, and set it on my nightstand. There were pieces of me I had shelved to survive my mother's version of who I should be. Now I was rebuilding with what remained. Later that evening, with the air in the apartment heavy with quiet, I opened my flight app. The cursor blinked at me, patient. I typed in, Reykjavik, one way. October 21st. I didn't hesitate. Reykjavik, October 21st, confirmed. The man at immigration didn't ask why I was traveling alone. Just stamped my passport and moved on. I liked that. The air outside Keflavik was sharp and salt-edged, biting without cruelty. I stepped off the shuttle and into a silence I hadn't known I missed. One not filled by strategic texts or family optics, just the sound of boots over gravel and wind negotiating with clouds. The streets of Reykjavik didn't ask who I was trying to be. They didn't know Elaine Wells or her foundation. They didn't care about viral posts or reputation damage. I was just Rachel again. No suffixes. No disappointments disguised as concern. No rewritten budgets hiding theft behind fine print. The Airbnb host had left a small note inside the apartment. Tea is on the second shelf. We don't do noise here. I read it twice, smiled, and brewed a mug strong enough to fog the windows. I didn't unpack. I just took out my laptop and opened the folder labeled The Quiet Reallocation. Inside, redacted transfer logs from the Wells Foundation. My foundation, proving what I already suspected. That Elaine had rerouted nearly $40,000 from the Youth Legal Literacy Fund into a shadow account she called Emergent Grace Portfolio, with Sabrina listed as creative liaison. Creative indeed. The logs came from a burner email signed only former staff. The subject line, "You should see this." They hadn't just stolen my wedding. They had stolen my work, my future, my signature. I didn't cry. Again, that well was dry. Instead, I copied the files into 3 backups and wrote back to the anonymous sender. "I won't sue. Yet. But I'm not deleting this. Thank you for speaking." That night, I walked along the waterfront in layers not meant for tourists. Reykjavik shimmered under a sky that never quite gave in to darkness. Somewhere to my right, a busker played a sad jazz tune on a saxophone so slow it felt like molasses over memory. I didn't take a photo. I didn't need to remember it the way Instagram would demand. I passed a bookstore nestled into the stone between 2 galleries. Inside, I browsed shelves full of languages I couldn't read, until I found a slim English volume wedged beside Nordic policy books. The Ethics of Voice. I bought it. No questions asked. At the register, the clerk, a woman in her 60s with snow-colored hair and no pretense, slid the receipt across and looked at me for a beat longer than usual. "You look like someone who finally left the room they were never allowed to decorate," she said. I didn't answer, just nodded. Back at the apartment, I lit a candle I found beneath the sink and opened a new tab on my browser. The blog still sat in drafts. Disinherit me. I changed the font, changed the title. Then I wrote, "When legacy becomes hostage, silence is ransom. I won't pay it anymore." Underneath, I added the redacted logs as downloadable PDFs. No captions, no bold headlines, just the data. Cold and unblinking. I scheduled the post for next Friday. Midnight. I printed 1 copy of the logs and placed them in a manila folder labeled, "In case silence isn't enough." Later that night, I stood in the shower until the mirror stopped fogging. Until my reflection held still long enough for me to whisper something into the steam. "In case I forget who I used to be." I didn't search for the video. The algorithm brought it to me. Some gifs are poisoned with timing. It appeared on my feed between an ad for wool socks and a sponsored Icelandic tour package. A live stream, already half over. I should have scrolled past it. Should have closed the app. But something in me, still raw and unfinished, pressed play. There it was. The venue. The lights. The arch I had designed in late-night Pinterest spirals while sipping chai and telling myself this time, this wedding, would matter. Sabrina stood beneath it, her veil tucked delicately behind her ears the way I had practiced for mine. The bodice of her dress shimmered under the canopy lighting, and I recognized every stitch. It was my dress. The one I'd paid for. The one I'd picked alone when Mom had said she was too busy to join. The quartet played softly in the background. Canon in D, my canon in D. The same arrangement I had requested, paced slightly slower than tradition, because I wanted to feel every step down the aisle. Sabrina walked to it now, clutching a bouquet of deep burgundy and pale cream. Exactly the colors I had begged the florist to blend into something that whispered, not shouted. The screen flickered as the comments rolled in. I couldn't look away. Didn't Rachel pick that venue? Isn't that her dress? This feels off. Some just dropped emojis. Others tagged friends. One said, "Rachel, if you see this, I'm sorry." But the one that hit hardest came from someone anonymous. "It's a beautiful wedding, but it feels haunted." The video cut to Elaine, standing at the head table, glass in hand. Her smile practiced, her cadence perfected. "To Sabrina," she said, "the daughter who made us proud." I paused the video. There was no mention of me. Not in the speech, not in the credits, not in the tags. Not even a stray family member whispering my name in a comment thread. I hadn't just been replaced. I had been deleted. I closed the laptop gently. Not like before, when I'd slammed it shut in tears. This time, it was a motion of finality, like setting down a gavel after the ruling is read. I walked to the window. Reykjavik was gray today, wrapped in low clouds and the kind of cold that doesn't bite. It numbs. I pulled my coat around me and stepped outside. No destination, just motion, just air. People passed, faces tucked beneath scarves, lost in their own errands and silences. I walked until I found a bench near the edge of the harbor, sat down, and watched a lone gull circle above a patch of ice. I didn't draft another post, didn't call Chelsea, didn't check the stats on my blog. I didn't need to. Instead, I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the small leather notebook I always carried. I flipped to the back page and wrote one sentence in black ink. I wasn't the ghost at their party. I was the absence that made it echo. 3 days after the wedding, I received a package. No return address, just my name, scrawled in handwriting that pretended not to be familiar. Inside, a check. $31,320. The memo read, reimbursement, dress, venue, emotional disturbance. There was no note, no apology, not even a signature. I stared at it for a long moment. Then I reached for the brass frame I'd bought from a thrift shop on Lagavegur, slid the check inside and placed it on the shelf above my desk, next to the candle, next to the file labeled Truth. It didn't make me whole, but it told me I hadn't imagined any of it. Some debts can't be repaid in numbers. Some wounds don't close with silence. But sometimes knowing they had to write the check, that's enough. She was erased, rewritten, replaced, until the truth made its quiet return. What they thought would stay buried rose back, documented and deliberate, proof that silence does not mean surrender. Justice may arrive without applause, but when it does, it rewrites every page they tried to steal. Because no wall of lies can stand forever against the tide of truth. If this story resonated with you, drop a comment, hit like, and subscribe. Your voice might be what someone else needs to hear.